Well, welcome everyone to our Lown webinar series. I'm Dr. Allison Kelly Hedgepath, joined by Dr. Lee Lewis and Dr. Bill Check from our office today. And we are excited this week to be talking about the environment and how that affects cognition. And I'm sure we'll hit on some aspects of cardiovascular health too. So we're joined by Dr. Rachel Hopman-Droste, who is a neuropsychologist who trained at the University of Utah and did a lot of postdoctorate research in Boston and was here for a number of years at Northeastern University. And she is here to share some of her research with us today. So welcome, Rachel.
Great. Thank you so much. I am looking forward to a great talk. I will go ahead and share. All right. Perfect. So first, I would like to thank everyone at the Lown Cardiovascular Group for hosting this webinar and inviting me to speak today. I enjoy getting to share my research and I appreciate everyone who's joined our webinar. And today I'm going to be talking to you about your cognition and attention in different environments, even like this beautiful city of Boston that you see here. As you probably know, Boston has been designed around green living with one of the largest park and waterway systems, providing access to nature throughout the city. And this is all based around this concept. The dilemma in nature is based around the concept that was proposed by E.O. Wilson back in the 1980s. Called biophilia, which is the tendency of humans to seek out and appreciate nature. Humans show their affinity for nature by framing beautiful landscapes in their living spaces, such as behind me, planning vacations to tropical beaches, and bringing plants into their homes and offices. Despite showing this admiration through displays of nature, adults don't have easy access to natural spaces. 80% of the American population and 40% of people globally live in a built urban environment. The built environment's rooted in comforts in order to ensure that the bad parts of nature, like bugs, dirt, weather, etc., don't have to be dealt with in their daily lives. We humans have built this environmental bubble in order to overcome obstacles that the outdoor bring and surround ourselves in the comforts of insulated walls and plush furniture. Americans spend about 93% of their day indoors and about 6% commuting. This means that out of the 8,760 hours that make up a year, only about 350 hours are spent outside of a man-made structure, which is less than an hour per day. According to the Environmental Protection Agency, spending more time indoors can increase health complications related to air pollutants. Indoor time can also disrupt natural sleep rhythms through artificial lighting, decrease your mood, and interfere with cognitive functions such as attention. However, this health crisis has literally been built around us, and we are suffering from the repercussions of a supposedly safer and more comfortable life. As a cognitive psychologist, I just find it fascinating that our brain, the way that we think and feel, can be manipulated by what we're exposed to through everyday life. Our brain, and specifically our attention, is a complex system that takes in all information and outputs some kind of response, whether that be good or bad. Attention allows us to regulate our behaviors through the ability to zoom in or focus on a specific task, such as listening to this webinar, inhibit distracting information, switch attention between multiple streams of information, or distribute attention across senses. So for example, while you're listening right now, there's probably some other noises or visual input that's trying to pull your attention away. You may be switching between listening to me and trying to do another task, and maybe even distributing attention between hearing me talk and looking at my slides. Attention is truly an interesting phenomenon, and it can be studied at any time because we're constantly using it. To get a little bit more technical, psychologists drew this flow chart that you see of the brain to better understand how information is handled. So in blue here, we have information that's entering through our senses, such as touch, taste, smell, etc., all at one time. Attention is needed to pick out what information is important and what is not. Attention is thought of as a filter or funnel to only let certain pieces of that information through to our memory system. Memory is broken down to our immediate working memory and our long-term stored memory. Once information has been processed, we are then able to make a response. However, our attention can be faulty depending on lots of factors, such as time of day, how hungry or sleepy we are, or if there's lots of information demanding our attention all at once. We can try to improve our attention by using and challenging it in diverse situations, but we're still limited to by our basic needs. So I want to do a quick test of your attention. This video that you'll see will show a brief experiment. It'll take about a minute, and I want you to concentrate as hard as you can on the task.
This is a test of selective attention. Count how many times the players wearing white pass the basketball. How many passes did you count? The correct answer is 15 passes. But did you see the gorilla? This video is from research by Daniel Simons and Christopher Chabris and is copyrighted. It is available for you.
So, pretty tricky, huh? If you had noticed the gorilla, you were doing pretty great. But I think that's a pretty fair test to show you how your attention system may fail even when we're trying our best. This is known as a phenomenon called inattentional blindness, when aspects of the environment go unnoticed due to cognitive distraction. Being unaware of aspects within your environment can have dangerous consequences. My colleagues at the University of Utah have studied inattentional blindness with a focus on distracted driving for the last 20 years. The research has shown that drivers who are talking on the phone, even through a hands-free system in your car, fail to notice their surroundings and perform at driving similar to someone who's sleepy or who's drunk. The distraction is based on our operating model of attention because the visual and manual modalities are not hindered. In another less scary example, you may have experienced the frustration of missing a step while trying to cook a complicated recipe. These situations can be common, but could have severe consequences. We would like our attention to be at our peak in order to avoid any unforeseen errors. So now I want to take time to reflect maybe on a time when you felt like your attention failed you or you weren't operating at your peak. What was the situation and what did you decide to do about it? A common example that I commonly hear is from phone usage, such as checking social media or checking your emails instead of focusing on a conversation that you're having. I'm sure it's not hard to think of these examples when you weren't at your prime. And while you're reflecting, I'd like to tell you a little bit about my background as a cognitive psychology researcher. My research started at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign as an undergraduate student. Here, I was studying for classes and majoring in psychology, and I found that during the nights when I would be studying late or out with friends, I wouldn't be able to concentrate on my classes the next day. And I was experiencing what's known as attentional fatigue. And through this fatigue, I found that my grades were slipping, and I wanted to understand how I could better optimize my attentional performance on a regular basis. So through this work in attention and multitasking, I landed at the University of Utah to complete my graduate degree. And I started looking at attention in real world environments, such as distracted driving. And as a graduate student, again, I was studying hard and really focusing time and effort. But during the weekends, I would spend my time going through and going to natural places within the local area of Utah. And if you've ever been to Utah, it's one of the most beautiful states. It has 5 national parks and is surrounded by mountains. So absolutely gorgeous. And I found that after those weekends where we were in absolutely beautiful environments, I felt much more restored and like I could keep going in my classes and had better attention. So I found this pretty fascinating and wanted to study it further. My advisor and I took on several studies or projects that looked at the effects of spending time in nature on cognition and attention, and specifically looking at neural signals related to attention and attentional fatigue during prolonged trips in nature. I'll talk a little bit about these trips later on, but we ran these studies in participants, mostly students, undergraduate students at the U, but also in groups of veterans and local community members in order to better understand how this applies to a general population. Through this research, I kept getting asked questions about what it is about nature. Is it the experience of being in nature? Is it just increased physical activity from being outdoors? And these questions led me to pursue a postdoctoral degree at Northeastern University, where I worked at the Center for Cognitive and Brain Health with a group of exercise physiologists. So through their work on physical activity in the brain, they studied participants ages 8 to 80, so all across the lifespan, to better determine the aspects of physical activity that can influence our brain and memory. Pairing up my previous research in nature with their research in exercise, we pursued different research projects that basically teased apart the effects from exercise compared to nature to better understand how each of those activities can improve your daily cognition. So you may think that I am probably anti-technology, anti-being indoors, anti the media or social media, but that simply isn't true. I do want to say that technology has many benefits. It can connect people, it can avoid social isolation and increase social connections. It can save lives and advance society. So there's lots of benefits to having these things in our lives, and media can pose as a distraction from daily life and daily worries. But as the average user adapts and adopts social media on a more consistent basis, we find that people have dysregulation about the amount of time that they're focusing in on these tasks or on the technology and spend less time in outdoor environments. So it's not necessarily about getting outside all the time. It's more about regulating the amount of time of what we're doing and noticing that the environment that we're in. And here's a graph that shows the amount of American adults who have adopted social networking sites based on age from 2006 to 2014. And of course, that was 6 years ago. So you can imagine that those numbers have increased even since then. So I wanted to understand the idea of inattentional blindness in relation to nature, and if nature could overcome some of these negative effects that we see from distraction and from technology. So in this simple study, we took a group of about 80 participants and had them go on a short walk through a beautiful garden located on the University of Utah campus. The walk was about a mile long, so it took about 20 to 30 minutes. And half of the group, so about 40 participants, walked while talking on a phone. We gave them the task and said, you need to have a conversation, you need to be interacting with your phone in some way. Some people were texted, some people were talking. So they had this distraction during their walk. Well, the other half of the group actually had their phones removed and were told, go out, we'll see you back in about 30 minutes. So they were fully present and aware of what was of their walk. We then gave them a recognition memory task, a task that had 15 pictures taken along their walk of very observable seen sites, and then 15 taken at a different garden. And we asked them to identify what they had seen along their walk. And we found that participants who talked on the phone, so engaging in distraction, remembered significantly fewer pictures than those who were undistracted. So the non-distracted group performed about 80%. They got 80% of those right, whereas the distracted group averaged to about 70%. So nature has clear benefits to cognition, mood, and health. And this has been shown through my own research as well as research decades earlier within the realm of psychology. Nature has shown to improve performance on attention-related tasks. So just a 20-minute walk in nature results in better working memory and better sustained attention. And taking breaks in nature or studying in nature leads to increased test performance for students. Likewise, just viewing nature or looking at videos of nature can increase someone's positive affect, so lead to better mood, increased creative performance, and then also increased self-reported happiness and well-being. And aspects of health also improve when spending time in nature. A classic study done in the 80s showed that a group of breast cancer survivors who recovered in the hospital improved faster when they had a view of nature compared to those who had a view of an urban environment or no view at all. Also, those who live near natural areas and expose themselves to nature on a daily basis showed decreased stress symptoms, so lower resting heart rate and better skin conductance, symptoms of stress than those who live in more of an urban environment. But what is it about nature specifically that can influence our attention and cognition? A researcher from the University of Michigan proposed what's known as the attention restoration theory. This theory breaks down what attention is. And he suggests that attention's like a muscle. So you can activate your attention, you can practice using it in different situations. And through this activity, he named it voluntary attention, where you're directing attention towards a specific task. However, this type of attention depletes when it's used. So just like a muscle, it's only going to work for a certain amount of time before it needs to rest and recover. And more formally, for a more technical side, this comes from top-down processing. So resources needed throughout the brain to exert effort from the prefrontal cortex, or a front of our brain that's responsible for higher order thinking and executive functioning. Once attention has been depleted, it needs to be restored. But how? That's the question that we're dealing with. Attention can be restored through what's known as involuntary attention. So to oppose voluntary attention, this type is indirect. It's more of general awareness of your environment without the need to engage or act upon anything, one specific thing in it. Involuntary attention can restore resources of voluntary attention. And Kaplan proposed two different types of involuntary attention, one of which that's restorative, known as soft fascination, and then hard fascination. My examples of hard fascination would be kind of alerting properties within the environment. So say you're sitting and, passively observing your environment, passively watching a sunset. This would be an example of soft fascination, where you're taking in your environment without necessarily acting upon it. Whereas hard fascination would be something like an alert. Your text notification goes off, or all of a sudden a car alarm goes off, or someone's screaming. That would pull your attention without necessarily having to focus on it. So Kaplan proposed that soft fascination is a key in order for attention to be restored. So as we had already stated and kind of talked about, attention is a complex system, and we need to have the ability to focus, inhibit, switch, and distribute our attention in order to act upon our environment. But when we have attentional fatigue, we have the failure to effectively do these things, which leads to consequences that we've talked about before. But what makes nature specifically so unique? Well, a natural environment is compatible with the requirements that are needed for restoration to occur. So that University of Michigan professor, Steve Kaplan, proposed there's 4 requirements needed for restoration, one of which being that soft fascination, your observation of your environment. Secondly, extent. The environment must contain enough information so that you can engage and find it fascinating. Third, it needs to be compatible. So this is where individual differences lie. And if you're sitting here thinking, nope, you're not going to get me to go out on a 5-mile hike out in the White Mountains, well, that may not be for everyone. Nature needs to be whatever you find that fits you or is most suitable for your needs. So say if you're someone who hates spending time on the beach, hates when it's hot, but loves when it's cold, you're going to find that colder environments will be more restorative for you. And lastly, he proposed being away. You need to be away from all the cognitive demands and constraints that you experience on a day-to-day basis. I call this the vacation effect because you're leaving anything behind and going out into a new environment where you can passively reflect and not have to bring your worries with you. And research shows that nature and natural environments have been measured in various ways and consistently show these benefits across studies. But we still have to answer the question as to why might our attention be programmed in a specific way and how we can use nature in order to better measure cognitive restoration. So first, I want to answer the question as to why researchers think our attention might be programmed to reflexively interact with the environment. Here, I'm taking information from outside of my own discipline to inform the world of cognitive scientists. Anthropologists propose that hunter-gatherer societies experience attention in a way that's different from how we do now due to the lack of attention-demanding structures. These societies experience soft fascination, that passive reflection, as their norm. They were able to passively observe their surroundings, and hard fascination, such as a predator lurking towards them or prey running away, carried significant signaling properties. These rare occurrences happen more often today as our society experiences hard fascinations, such as text notifications, alarms, horns, light pollution as the constant. We are in a state of constantly being on alert to monitor our environment and experience voluntary attention, the need to focus on a task constantly throughout our day. We rarely get the time to passively reflect on our surroundings. So again, I want to take a moment to reflect about maybe some of this has brought up a daily practice that you engage in. Go ahead and think of that, maybe write it down, identify what are your intentional practices that you do throughout your day in order to restore your attention, and what daily practices would you like to try or could add to your schedule in order for restoration to occur. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about some of the research that we had done at the University of Utah in order to measure and understand cognitive restoration. And the specific question we are interested in is if all of these benefits happen, like cognitive performance improves and mood changes, there should be neural frequencies related to attention and cognition that also change and reflect those, that signal those changes from prolonged exposure in nature. So in this work, we took a group of students across several trips at this point, across the last 5 years, and have brought them down to southern Utah in an area that's pretty deserty, but has no access to any kind of grocery store. It doesn't have Wi-Fi. It's pretty remote. And the students go camping on a week-long trip. During this time, we measure their neural signals of attention using what's known as an EEG cap or electrical cap that picks up electrical signals from their cortex or the outside of the brain. We measure about a week or two before the trip to get their baseline measurements. Then we record again during the trip on either the third, fourth, or fifth day in order for them to have time to kind of reflect into the natural cycle that we get into of camping and hiking. And then about a week or 2 weeks after the trip, we re-record to see how that's changed over time. And what we find is that 3 days in nature, or roughly 3 days, can significantly alter electrical activity in the brain that's associated with internal ruminations and attention. Participants show less rumination-related activity, so less of those internal mind-wandering thoughts when in nature compared to before or after the trip. Likewise, this 3-day trip improved performance on tasks measuring executive functions and attentional processing and improved creative performance. Students reported feeling better and having better overall well-being. And importantly, these trips in nature were not always the most pleasant. So even though you might be thinking, oh, that sounds wonderful, spending time away, We did have some inclement weather, and some students reported negative feelings from experiencing some of these negative effects in the Utah desert. However, neural signals of attention and internal rumination were still significantly altered, even for the students who didn't enjoy the trip. So time in nature can sometimes be a little bit glorified. There are unpleasant aspects that we usually try to avoid, but yet are inevitable. And even when we haven't had the greatest experience, nature can still positively influence the way that we think and feel and our attention. I'll also say that, So how long should we be spending in nature? Well, research has yet to confirm the exact time frame needed for restoration to occur, but we can use the research we have collected so far to create a rough estimate of what's known as a nature prescription. Michael Easter, the author of The Comfort Crisis, has labeled these estimates through this nature pyramid. The pyramid is the recommended amount of time that you should spend outdoors throughout the year. Michael suggested that once every year, you should try to go out on a long weekend, so a 3-day trip to a new natural space. By creating memories in the outdoors, you may experience the neural changes that we saw in our students on their nature trip. He also suggests spending 5 hours per month, so about 1 to 2 hours each weekend, in an outdoor space. During this time, you may be exploring a new state park or spending time with your family in the backyard. And during the week, he recommends 60 minutes, so about 10 minutes each day, trying to take a walk outside or enjoying your local nature, however that you may see fit. Through these guidelines, you can incorporate opportunities for your attention and cognition to be restored. However, the question still remains as to how the positive effects from spending time in nature may differ from spending time exercising, especially since nature is associated with being physically active. Research shows that greater fitness and regular physical activity, especially in adults 65 and older, is associated with better executive functioning, controlled processing, spatial working memory, and faster processing speeds, as well as better physical health. So if we see similar effects from both nature and exercise, we wonder if these effects are additive when combining nature and exercise. A 3-month virtual nature cycling intervention study showed greater improvements in executive functioning and long-term memory, as well as greater reductions in body fat compared to 3 months of just regular cycling. Natural exercise environments are also rated more restorative and preferred over built or indoor environments. So people tend to actually stick with their exercise program more regularly. Likewise, those who choose to be physically active in nature on a regular basis reported decreased stress and felt more mentally balanced than those who are physically active indoors. Therefore, research would suggest that not only does nature benefit cognitive functioning, but exercising in nature also shows benefits beyond regular indoor exercise. So at my work at Northeastern, I continued to tease apart the effects of exercise and nature exposure using virtual reality technology. In this demonstration here, the participant is walking on what's known as an omnidirectional platform through a virtual landscape. The environment shows either a wooded trail, such as what you see here, with mountains and waterfalls, or an urban jungle with busy streets, cars going by, lots of noises happening. The participants, who complete 5 separate days of testing, navigate through these virtual environments while their heart rate and cognition are being assessed. And I'll admit, this is not the perfect way to measure an environment. Virtual reality is limited based on auditory and visual features and doesn't give the true experience of being outdoors. But this research allows us to collect data in a controlled and safe environment with participants, and the current study is running with participants 65 to 80. The study aligns with a research thread that has measured the effects of working memory and mood while sitting in virtual nature in urban environments. The graphs on the left show improved working memory capacity after sitting in virtual nature, shown here in green, compared to sitting in a virtual urban environment, shown in purple. By adding a 20-minute session of physical activity, we can compare how being physically active in different environments can influence cognitive functioning and attention. And I'll also mention this research is still ongoing and we're collecting participants. I also want to call attention towards this study and other ongoing studies happening at the Center for Cognitive and Brain Health at Northeastern. This center has a focus on older adult health and has many opportunities to be a part of the research. One of the largest studies that's funded through the National Institute of Health, known as Ignite, presents the opportunity to participate in an exercise program over the course of a year. During this time, participants ages 65 to 80 can complete a series of brain and physical tests to see how the activity has influenced their body. And here is the contact information to learn more about this research or any of the other ongoing studies that are happening at our center. So research efforts have established that time in nature can benefit both the brain and the body in many unique ways. While I recommend setting daily intentions to spend time in nature throughout the week, I also encourage you to follow the 4 principles to obtain a more restorative experience. First, remain undistracted by leaving the burdens behind. Find nature near you that is accessible and enjoyable for you, and set your intention to relax and be mindful of your experience. Through these actions, you may find new spaces or explore your familiar areas in a brand new way. Remember that nature pyramid. Seek out experiences that benefit your mind on a regular basis. Through these actions, you'll find that your attention and cognition have been refreshed and reset in a new way. I also encourage you, if you're interested in this topic, to check out some of these resources shown here. I had mentioned Michael Easter's book called The Comfort Crisis, which delves into the problem that we have between being too comfortable and getting outside and kind of addressing some of those discomforts. I also encourage you to check out The Nature Fix, written by Florence Williams, which talks about some of the research that goes into things like forest bathing or other perspectives beyond the realm of cognitive psychology, as well as several articles that were published. I also want to thank all the researchers, participants, and funding sources, as well as you for your time today. And I encourage you to kind of reflect on now something that you've learned through this research or through this work, and something you would like to try for the future. My contact information is down below, and I'd love to have a discussion about this or answer any questions.
That was wonderful, Rachel. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really a whirlwind overview. I think you really did a great job of packing so much information into those slides. And I mean, I know there's a lot of topics there that I want to unpack.
Sure.
Probably nice to start with talking a little more about exercise in nature, just because exercise is part of our recommendations, obviously, to all of our patients, and something that Brian, Dara, and I definitely commit to practicing on a personal basis too, because we know all the merits. I personally would much prefer to be outdoors when I exercise, and I do think that has some impact, whether we can really identify it, you know, from a scientific perspective on our outlook, and at least my outlook for the day, if I've gotten out in nature before I make it into the office. Do you have any details from your research as to why you think that might be?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the biggest aspect of spending time in nature is how enjoyable it is. We find it restorative, but exercise is not always the same. Exercise can be enjoyable. It can also be challenging and hard, and can be hard to engage in. So I think finding that right type of exercise, whether it be running outdoors or even just going for a walk, is really important, as long as it's something that motivates you to engage in it on a regular basis. So I think the research side of it is coming along. I think there's lots of opportunities to look deeper into these specific effects on cognition, but research has shown that both exercise and nature exposure individually have these really great benefits to the brain and body. So I think it's more so just finding that right fit of what everyone always asks, what type of nature is best or what type of exercise is best. And while we do have recommendations based on science, I truly think it's whatever fits the person the best, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, a brisk walk in a park might benefit you more, your emotional well-being too, than a run on the treadmill, right? Depending on your emotional state. And I do think that there is growing research data that we have that really is looking at the effect of walking in green space on blood pressure, on heart rate, and on lab values too. So like you said, I think we are gaining that scientific data to support what maybe we've each have experienced, that there is something going on maybe at a larger level affecting multiple body processes. I don't know, Dara or Brian, if you have any thoughts on that. Oh, Dara, you're muted.
Sorry, I'm out of practice. No, there have been studies. And so for so many of our patients who have high blood pressure, there was one that showed people who walked in the city versus walked in the forest. The ones who walked in the forest had almost a 10-point drop in their blood pressure compared to the others. So while it's not always possible, it is definitely preferable, I think, for most of us if we can walk somewhere in nature. And I wanted to ask you, Rachel, you mentioned the term forest bathing, and there's a Japanese word, Shinron Yuku, something like that, that is forest bathing. And the Japanese have known about this for a long time, which is that not literally bathing, but being in the forest, bathing in the environment. Perhaps it's something that the trees, I don't want to use the term pheromones, but the trees seem to secrete some chemicals that lower blood pressure, enhance endorphins. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I am fascinated by the idea of forest bathing and have looked into it a little bit. Of course, it's outside of the field of the hard science of psychology, but it is something that's been practiced for centuries and shows positive effects. So yes, and I highly encourage the Nature Fix really dives into kind of the practice and some of the more scientific perspectives around forest bathing that, and like you said, it's not bathing. It's more of just being present in the moment in the forest and having the intention to go out and name what you need from the experience, and then get in touch with all of the senses, not just visual, not just auditory senses, but all of the senses around being present in a natural environment. So I think it's a great topic. I'm definitely not an expert, but it's something that, I hear a lot of, why do we need research when this topic's been known about for centuries? Everyone knows that nature is good for you. So that's definitely an example of another avenue that this work has gone, and I think is really great.
And I do think that in that forest bathing literature, Dara, that they've really looked at some of the sickest populations, right, and shown to have positive outcomes in patients that have, advanced cardiac disease and renal disease, and not typical patients that you would think, go out in the wilderness, right, or at least not in kind of our sheltered American lives. So I think there is something to be said for these processes and how probably, the mental connection with how we're feeling, right, and how that impacts all of our different organ systems.
Thank you so much. I always in awe of how much I can learn from my colleagues and some more food for thought. Thank you so much. Really great talk, and I've got a lot to think about. When we manage our patients, exercise is the first hurdle, and the consistency of exercise is essential. And so I don't want to ever create an obstacle to getting out and moving, or even being inside and moving. And if you live in the Northeast, I always say you cannot be a fair weather friend to your exercise. You've just got to be in a routine. So you have to have a plan or a contingency plan to exercise, whether the weather's good or bad. You know, I'm going to pay more attention to being outdoors when the weather is good, because I think there's so much to learn from that. I think how we exercise is also important, and you know, it unnerves me a little bit during the COVID pandemic, seeing what happened to kids when there was the loss of you know, structured exercise, and certainly a lot of indoor activity and play, and sedentary and obesity and diabetes is increasing in significant proportion. So there's that pediatric population. Our patients tend to be, you know, adult to the older age demographic. And there was this huge movement towards being from suburban to urban pre-pandemic, and now people are trying to move back in and find places to escape to. I guess my comment and question to you is the notion of what we do while we're exercising. We're trying to cram so much activity into our days. And sometimes we will exercise while we're watching a conference or a TED Talk or a news. And obviously outdoors is ideal, and it can be life-altering when you're outdoor in beauty. But when we are indoors and exercising, I always try to tell my patients to just shut it off, listen to music, you know, watch a nature video, or listen to a story so your imagination can run off with you, rather than listening to the news or doing work while you're exercising. And again, there's so many layers to exercise, one being the cardiovascular health and fitness, but your focus, which I don't pay enough attention to, is the issue of cognition.
Absolutely. I mean, it's being present there, regardless of what you're doing while you're exercising, you're benefiting your physical health. But in order to get that extra benefit to your mental health, I think it's being in the moment and being mindful. And exercise is not always easy to do. It's easier to be distracted and kind of focus on something else. So you're not focusing on maybe how much pain you're in or how uncomfortable you are, but getting out of that comfort zone and kind of paying attention, listening to those body signals and kind of adapting can really benefit in the long term. And you mentioned COVID and kids, and I mentioned that the Center for Cognitive and Brain Health has studies that run from ages 8 to 80. We have seen through COVID and even now that kids are suffering. We do what's called a fitness test, a VO2 max test with all of our participants, and older adults, kids alike, have shown decreased performance on these tests after COVID. So we can't make recommendations since we're in the realm of research, but we do see the trends and, you know, kind of want to bring more emphasis to why it's so important to be getting out and creating that schedule. Maybe it doesn't look the same as before COVID. Maybe things have changed a little bit, but having that opportunity to improve and refine a regular exercise schedule and a regular mindfulness schedule, and bringing in the aspect of mindfulness into regular exercise.
Yeah, that's a great point, because I think you did kind of glance over some of your research that you've done that really made the bridge, right, to how being in nature is very similar to an advanced mindfulness practice, right? And how some of us can maybe get there faster, right, from just spending time outdoors, right? Can you maybe broaden that discussion a little bit?
Sure, absolutely. I hear from meditation experts about how the practice of meditation involves a lot of these aspects of restoration. You're being mindful, you're away. And they actually showed in a group of Buddhist monks, the neural signals that change from meditation actually look a lot like the neural signals changing from time in nature. So the experience of being present in nature can improve meditation practices and are very similar in many ways and lead to a lot of similar cognitive benefits as well, and mood benefits. So I think they can be different as well. Meditation takes a lot of focus and a lot of effort in order to fully engage, but having that practice, just that first step, can definitely improve over time. So I have done talks for a large variety of people, from people who are rock climbing experts to yoga passionate kinds of people, and they all connect on a different level in their own way because of different things. So actually, when it comes to things like meditation and mindfulness, a lot of rock climbers will say that they totally get it. They're in the flow, they're in the zone, even though it's something that's extremely challenging. And, you know, for me, has never rock climbed before, that seems like something that would take up a lot of mental effort. But it's that finding that kind of niche of what's right for you, time in nature, where you're fully in the focus and fully in the zone and paying attention to your environment in a different way outside of your normal life.
And that comes back to Dr. Bilczek's point, again, that, you know, sometimes we just maybe hobble ourselves from trying to cram too much in and just being distracted when we take on all these tasks, right? And it would be better just to, you know, focus on your walk and your surroundings than trying to, you know, to multitask, which I know that we're all kind of guilty of. I do think that some of the data that you started to present too really shows how your blood pressure and how these physiologic measurements change, as well as brain waves and brain function, right? To mimic that meditative state just in nature, right? So it's just another, you know, reason for us, you know, not to skip the outdoor walk, or, you know, our you know, carving out that time for yourself in your day, no matter what, you know, that might look like.
Absolutely. Yeah.
There's an interesting question in the chat, which is that does swimming in an indoor pool have the same kind of benefits as being in nature? And I'm very curious to hear what you have to say, Rachel, because I think the worst thing to do is to not do anything. Way better than that is to do something physical. And even if it's indoors, which in Boston is often going to be indoors at certain times of the summer, it's too hot, in the winter it's too icy. But so a lot of us do exercise indoors as well. And then we certainly don't want to give the impression that that's not good for us, right? It's certainly excellent to exercise no matter how you do it, where you do it, when you do it. We're just talking about that additional sort of, especially mental health benefit from being outdoors. But what do you think of this question, swimming indoors in a pool?
I mean, of course, that's definitely beneficial. And I think what's interesting is the aspect of water. And, you know, it's one of those aspects of nature that we can bring inside. And there's been studies that look at people viewing water landscapes, so like oceans, beaches, lakes, compared to just mountain rocky landscapes or desert landscapes. And water is consistently shown to be the most restorative feature. So I think, you know, not only is swimming a great exercise, and yes, it's definitely necessary to be indoors, but having that access to water, I think, is really special and kind of has some of those properties.
Yeah, I have to agree. You know, we had a wonderful talk, I think it was by an occupational therapist, about talking about bringing the outdoors in and even just having some plants. I see in your background, you've got a picture of mountains, you've got fish in the background there. Dr. Lewis has lovely plants. My plant is kind of dying behind me, but working on it. You know, it's interesting for me personally. I'm a bit of an extreme athlete kind of person in the way that I have to do things that really push me and take my mind off everything else, things that are really sometimes a little dangerous, whether it's kite surfing or recently, you know, doing some treacherous mountaineering and trail rides and things like that. And then the focus on survival becomes so intense that when you're done and you have survived, you feel the sense of peace, this sense of, you know, not only achievement, but, you know, you're ready to kind of take on all the things that are relatively small things that we make into big things, because I think we're constantly bombarded by these things. And you know, I get this a slight benefit from exercising, you know, that 20-30 minutes at a high intensity, but it's nothing like that being outdoors and fairly intense, and a level of danger. And I just, you know, is there something wrong with me? What do I do? Should I, you know, just a little therapy session for me, please?
Sure. And I mean, I don't think that necessarily everyone would agree that going out and putting yourself in danger makes you feel better in the end. But I think it's interesting, and it falls in line with that 3-day effect of spending those 3 days is kind of crucial in order to fully separate and fully disengage from the constant hard fascination, constant attention is on and focused, and more into the realm of having, you know, this general observation with that need in order to have the alerting properties of your attention be actually used in a way that they're meant and designed to be used and programmed. So I think to each their own, but having those extra days, that extra time away, you know, students would report on our 3-day trip that the first day they still had some of those mental burdens of assignments that were due, finals week coming up. The second day, they were starting to get a little bit more comfortable, starting to get into the rhythm, but it was the third day that was shown to kind of have that relaxation, that moment of, okay, I'm here, I can fully disconnect, I can fully be away. So I think that definitely plays into it, of the timing, and then afterwards reflecting back on that experience as your attention has been altered and changed. We've done other studies and trying to measure neural signals within just a 30-minute time frame, and it doesn't show the same effect as the 3 days, which is why we think that this is cumulative. You know, a 30-minute time in nature is great for benefiting your mood and helping you feel better, but the extra time spent throughout the year is really what's changing attention.
So 3-day weekends from now on.
Yes.
Some cultures, that's what's, you know, accepted, and I think, you know, we're so used to the 24/7 driven, and I think it's not good for, you know, if you look at what's happening in our country, maybe it's a symptom of that.
Absolutely. I think it's hard sometimes to talk about this because people feel preached at. It's just another thing that's on their list that they're not accomplishing because of the way that we've structured our schedules and our environment. But I think trying to take control a little bit of our schedule and not make it so demanding, however that might be, I think it's just important to be a little bit more mindful of how we're spending our time, and especially how we're spending any amount of free time that we have.
There's a question about the social aspect of being in nature too, and I think that is, you know, in line with what you've just been talking about. And how do we, you know, figure out what should be kind of done solo and what we should really, you know, embrace kind of a social environment?
Absolutely. I think that's a very important part of being out in nature. And that's another individual difference where some people may say that they feel most comfortable being alone and having that experience, or based on your needs. It goes back to the idea of compatibility with what you're seeking out from the experience. But I do think that time in nature with others is a shared opportunity in order to connect and away from any kind of distraction. A lot of times when you meet up with friends, you may find that they're distracted or kind of just run through all of the problems that they're having in their day-to-day life, which I think is important, but there also needs to be reflection beyond that where you can really connect. So nature provides that by having that away time, the vacation effect time with others. And in our research, I will say it's one of our major kind of flags or problems that we had been trying to kind of understand or delve into, because all the trips that all the students were on were together. So they were interacting and being social, and it made the trip so much fun. But we need to do further research to better understand how individual trips or how longer trips may change these effects or influence these effects. So there's definitely room for more research, and more research is needed to kind of move this forward.
There's a wonderful opportunity for people to take these bicycle tourist trips. So you're not just in a bus, but you go places where you've never been, and then you get on a bike. And it was one of these amazing opportunities. And I think we can all be very creative with ideas on vacation, and how to be restorative, and exercise and explore at the same time. I love this notion, so I just appreciate the new insight that you've given me. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this was very inspirational all around. And I think, some of the take homes, right, was trying to set aside that time for maybe 3 days to think about being fully unplugged in a way. And then how in our day-to-day life, you can incorporate in a walk outside, right? And make sure you turn off your cell phone when you're doing that, right? I think that's really great advice to all of us.
Absolutely. It's cumulative. It's not just, your 30-minute time. It's 30 minutes, 20 minutes, however long you can afford each day, on top, day after day. And I think that's where you see the main benefits, beyond just the immediate kind of results. So yes.
If we have time for one more question, I'm really curious, Rachel, about your advice about sunlight exposure, because I think some of the benefit of outdoors is the sun hitting the back of the eye. It helps suppress melatonin. It helps with our circadian rhythms. Anything there? Because I do think I've had some patients who really can't do a lot of walking, and I advise the family, put them in their chair outdoors just for 20 minutes or so to get the sun during the day. Is there any use to that?
Absolutely. Yes. I think, being outdoors however you can is extremely important. I think the sunshine, there's a lot of aspects, like I talked about with the virtual reality nature, that is not incorporated. Being in a real world, natural environment has aspects beyond just visual and auditory senses that I think is what's really driving these effects. And there's lots of studies that show just sitting in nature, just a 10-minute sit in nature, can show great benefits to decreasing stress and improving mood. So, my office is set up viewing my nature. So I try to do what I can to also kind of have that benefit. But wherever we can get it, that's what's most important.
Well, I think on that note, we'll take this call for reevaluating our life and really run with it. So I hope everybody in the audience enjoyed this talk as much as I did, and I really do appreciate this kind of intimate discussion about how we can really change and reevaluate what we're doing. So it's really wonderful. So thank you, Rachel, for sharing with us.
Thank you. This has been wonderful. And feel free to reach out with any other questions or thoughts. I'm always happy to continue the conversation.
And we'll make sure we include in our post-webinar survey all the resources that you had on that slide, so that we can all add to our reading lists and check out the research that's going on in Boston.
Great.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We have an updated webinar list on our website, and we look forward to seeing everyone back next month. Bye-bye.
Thank you.